a geopolitical expert, Geoffrey Miller. Geoffrey, kia ora, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
This is certainly an historic occasion, and one which you would need to be quite optimistic to say, hey, yeah, this is going to happen before Christmas. The two sides seem to be poles apart, but with a little bit of involvement from Donald Trump, the deal has been signed. Certainly an historic occasion, Geoffrey.
Indeed, and Donald Trump just shows that he's the master of these set-piece events. There's just something about Donald Trump and the way he can have these big meetings, big summits. He managed to get 20-odd world leaders together with a couple of days' notice in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt to sign off on this peace deal. And he went to the Knesset in Jerusalem, the Israeli parliament. He signed the guest book. I was watching that live on Monday night. That was Monday evening, New Zealand time. And he signed the guest book saying a new beginning, an honor to be here, and held it up for the cameras. And there is just something about the pageantry of Trump. And you felt that you were witnessing history with this. And it was a rare good news day, you would have to say, on Monday. Absolutely, because those 20 hostages, Israeli hostages, went home to their families, the 20 living hostages. Israel withdrew from a good part of the Gaza Strip, not all of it, but a good part of it, and aid began to flow through more freely. So there were some really good things that happened on Monday. There's a lot of work to go, though, and that's, I guess, where attention is turning to now.
And certainly some significant scenes of celebration in many parts of the world in response to this. The peace is tentative already from inside Gaza after the Israeli withdrawal. Some reasons to be concerned. Of course, Hamas still very much in control of the Gaza Strip in the absence of Israeli forces. Some retribution. We've seen some of that already.
Indeed, the Hamas has executed a number of people, and Hamas is now fighting with a number of other militant groups inside Gaza, and I guess this might be a foretaste of what's to come, a civil conflict perhaps, with Israeli forces moving out. Then Hamas turns its attention to others in Gaza, perhaps the unity that had existed in a sense when you had this war between Hamas and Israel. All the attention was focused on opposing Israeli forces. Now that attention turns to other groups operating inside Gaza, other Palestinian groups, other militant groups. So 7, I think, were executed by Hamas. You've also seen what Hamas is calling a breach of the ceasefire by Israel, because six people were killed by Israeli drones in the last 24 hours. Also, Israel says that they got too close to their forces, and that was why, and they were defending their line. Who knows where the truth lies? But you've also seen Hamas not holding up their part of the bargain in terms of releasing the 28 dead hostages. Only 8 have been released so far. Just 4 further hostages were released in the last couple of hours also, but we're far away from the 28. And Israel may well use that as a reason to say, well, the ceasefire doesn't exist now because Hamas has not held up its part of the bargain. The deal was 20 living hostages, 28 dead hostages. They've only released 28 in total, 20 living, 8 dead. And Israel is now threatening to not open the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. That was meant to be part of the deal, which would allow aid to flow more freely and would allow a number of people from Gaza to be evacuated to Egypt for medical treatment. Well, that Rafah border crossing is closed, and aid is flowing through only at the rate of 300 trucks a day instead of 600 trucks a day that were promised. So, I thought it was important to give credit where credit is due with Donald Trump, and the ceasefire, a peace deal, is always a good thing, and I'm very happy to give Donald Trump credit if he was the one who brought it all together. But I have to say, when you look at what's coming next, the signs are not particularly hopeful, because it's just very difficult to see how you get on to the next phases of the peace deal.
Of course, any peace deal moving forward, and this is one of the conditions, that Hamas will not be part of the government, the authority in Gaza moving forward. So there will be a jostling for power, the setting up of any type of interim government will take some time to get established. And an international peacekeeping force, again, this doesn't happen overnight. There's a number of pieces that need to be brought into place. It is a complicated thing to set up and to unscramble. So yeah, not all of the steps forward are going to be smooth sailing, perhaps.
Indeed, look, we have to give some time for this to all pan out, and you hope that it is just a question of time and that the International Stabilization Force that was part of that 20-point peace plan does come in. Remember, that was going to be overseen by a board of peace with Donald Trump and Tony Blair, and then there was going to be a Palestinian group of technocrats and a police force established.
Yep.
That might involve other Muslim countries coming in, according to some reports, the likes of Indonesia, perhaps would provide police forces. But there's just no detail to this, and there doesn't seem to be any agreement on what's going to happen. Donald Trump said he was still talking about Tony Blair and whether it would be acceptable and so forth. It doesn't sound like any of this stuff has been worked out
Yeah.
or agreed to. The key thing from Israel's perspective will be about the disarmament of Hamas, because that was meant to be the second part of the deal. Well, Hamas has got plenty of arms, it seems,
Yeah.
as we can see from the events that have happened since this ceasefire came into place, and they seem very much in control of Gaza. How do you get those arms off them? That would be the big question. And is Israel going to sit there and wait for this deal to happen, or is Israel going to now move back into Gaza at some point? Is Israel going to lose patience? Benjamin Netanyahu saying, well, we've got the living hostages back. There's nothing to stop us now going back in there. If Hamas is not going to hold up their end of the deal, if they are not disarming, if there's no international force, we're going to go and finish the job, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So look, you hope that doesn't happen. You hope that the peace deal is worked out and that it is all negotiated and the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that there's a better tomorrow for Gaza. You really hope that, because it's been so horrific. 67,000 dead, and around 20,000 of those have occurred just really in the last 6 months or so since that ceasefire broke down in March. So it's been horrific, and an absolutely horrific 2 years of war, and the last 6 months has been particularly brutal.
Now, what happens with Hamas? Of course, a big question mark over that. The very real prospect that Hamas will just re-emerge as something with a different name. Now, we've seen that before in Iraq, of course, when Al-Qaeda becomes ISIS, and hey, some of the troops are the same people. It just changes some leadership, and things shuffle round. You haven't solved the problem, and hey, between Al-Qaeda and ISIS, that particular example, maybe things were made even worse. What emerges from the vacuum, even if Hamas is defeated or disarms or pulls back, another group likely to emerge in that space, and we're not sure what that will look like at this stage.
Indeed. It's very much a blank canvas. We do know that Iran is severely weakened, and now after the past 2 years of war, we've seen Israel take it to Iran directly, but also to their proxies in Lebanon. We saw the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria. Now that's important because Iran was supplying arms to Hamas. So listeners might think, well, that problem's been dealt with. Iran's not going to be funneling any more arms to Hamas. But there are plenty of reports that is not the case, and that Iranian weapons are still finding their way through to Gaza, or at least Iran is attempting to do so. There are reports that they're stockpiling weapons intended for Hamas in Sudan. I mean, who knows about some of the veracity of some of these reports, but I don't think Hamas or Iran are going to go quietly on all of this.
Yep.
It would be great if everyone worked together. And Donald Trump talked about the historic dawn of a new Middle East on Monday, and he talked about the need for peace and the war is over. He kept stating this.
Mm.
But it's one thing to say that, and another thing to actually create it. And after this war, there's going to be so much resentment, I
Yep.
think, or mutual hatred, really, on both sides that's just going to linger unless I don't know, there's some big reconciliation that happens. I think probably the only answer, if there is a way forward, it has to be that roadmap with a timeline for a two-state solution.
Yep.
And there has to be just a huge amount of money pumped into Gaza for a rebuilding plan. Think of it like the Marshall Plan after World War II
Hmm.
in devastated Europe, where you just pump billions and billions and billions of dollars into Gaza for reconstruction, rebuilding, and you show a positive alternative. You show that, look at the benefits of peace. If you rebuild, look at all these new buildings that are being built, new parks, new schools, new hospitals. There's a better future there. And if you make peace more attractive than war, then perhaps we can break this cycle and end up with a two-state solution. But, unfortunately, it's going to be a pretty hard task to get to that point. But the Gulf states, in particular, are standing in the wings. They do have a lot of funds
Yep.
available. They've
Yep.
got a lot of money that I think they are willing to invest in Gaza. But you've got to get that security situation sorted out first, because as we saw with post-war Iraq in the early 2000s, if you have a power vacuum,
Yep.
you just end up with a whole lot of lawlessness, insurgencies, and terrorism and everything else. So, it's a case of watch the space. We'll see what happens, but we just have to keep our eyes very much focused on Gaza and keep Donald Trump focused as well
Yeah.
on his peace plan, because Donald Trump has a habit of moving on to the next topic. And
Yep.
we saw that earlier in the year. He came in, the ceasefire was brought in back in January, the early ceasefire in Gaza. Then he moved on. He moved on to Ukraine.
Yep.
He moved on to Liberation Day and tariffs against China and everything else. Donald Trump doesn't stay for long, doesn't stay focused on one issue for long, and he'll move on to the next issue. So we need to keep Donald Trump focused on this issue and get this peace plan working somehow.
Or at least to deputise to capable people. Perhaps that involves Tony Blair and having the money of the Arab states and the goodwill of some people to really work through that reconciliation, because I think that's so vital here. And to be fair, we have seen this before. We have seen this in places like South Africa and Rwanda, where there have been atrocities committed from one group of people to another, where we have seen restoration and forgiveness and some type of lasting peace to some extent. So that may be possible here, particularly with the involvement of Israel's neighbours in a peaceful and constructive way.
You hope so. And in Donald Trump's first term, he set up the Abraham Accords,
Hmm.
which was the normalization of relations between countries such as the United Arab Emirates and Israel. And a number of others joined that plan. And before the October 7th war, there was talk even of Saudi Arabia joining that
Yeah.
arrangement. And there was a report this week that suggested that Indonesia was also going to join the Abraham Accords. That
Wow.
was then later denied. And you see that some of the difficulties of these things, Benjamin Netanyahu was invited at the last minute to go to the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh
Yep.
and stand with the other Arab leaders and other world leaders. But Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president, refused to land his plane. He said, if Netanyahu's going, well, I'm not.
Yeah.
And so then he was uninvited, or Netanyahu found an excuse not to go,
Hmm.
so forth. So you can see how difficult it is to actually end up with this reconciliation. You're going to have intermediaries. I think, look, Benjamin Netanyahu will have to stand down
Yep.
at some point. It's Israeli Prime Minister. I just think he's not going to be a viable partner in any post-war deal that is sustainable. I think there's plenty of room for countries like New Zealand to bring it back home here, to play a small but significant role working with others in that reconciliation process, if there is one, and we hope there will be,
Yeah.
in that peace process. There's going to be plenty of tasks for everyone. The Gulf states will have the money and they have the local regional knowledge, but outside players, the likes of New Zealand, I think they can still play an important role because there is just going to be so much resentment and hatred
Yeah.
that has to be unwound, or there has to be a reconciliation process to try and move past that. And I think there's going to be it's just an enormous demand for the services of small states like New Zealand. This is just one conflict out of many we're seeing in the world at the moment, and small states like New Zealand, I do think, can play a small but significant role in that rebuilding, trust building, confidence building, peace building process.
Jeffrey, really appreciate your insight on this one. It is a tentative peace, but we hold on to hope for the Middle East. Thank you so much for joining us and for your insight today.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.